Okay. My name's Dr. Jackie Jacob, and I am one of the state specialists in poultry at the University of Kentucky. And as part of my job responsibilities, I work with the National E-Extension, which is the online version of the Cooperative Extension Service, to help with small and backyard flocks. And as part of that responsibility, I organize the monthly webinars that we have. We've been having them for several years now, and they're all recorded, and the recordings are available online. I will put some links in the chat shortly on how you can access those, as well as the ones that are coming up for the rest of the year. As the webinar goes on, the way it will work is I will be on mute and you won't see my video. If you have a question, please use the Q&A box or put it in the chat box. I will monitor both while the presentation is going on. And if the question is pertinent to what is being discussed at that particular moment, i.e. is a clarification of something that's said, you will see me pop back up and I will ask the question. If the question is not pertinent to what's being said, I will hold it till the end. So if something pops in your head that you want to ask, feel free to put it in there, and I will include it at the end. There will be time for Q&A questions. So hopefully that will work for everybody. And today's webinar is on raising exhibition chickens as your backyard flock. And Brett, I don't know how you say it, Kreifers? Kreifers, okay, is from Nebraska Extension, and as you can see, he's been raising exhibition chickens for quite some time now, and he's going to talk about, if you've got a backyard flock and you want to use it for exhibition chickens, what all is involved. So it's all yours, Brett, and I will be on mute and watching and monitoring the questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jackie. Hello, everyone. Like she said, my name is Brett Kreifers, and I am an extension educator in Nebraska Extension, and I'm based in Douglas and Sarpy counties, which is the Omaha metro area. So we're in an urban setting where we have a very growing influence of backyard flocks in the two counties. So what I'm going to talk about today is raising your exhibition chickens as your backyard flock. So having your flock do two things for you: give you eggs, and I guess three things: meat possibly, but as well as having something to show. So just some background about how I got to this spot. So I am a product of a backyard flock. So I had a backyard flock when I was really young. I lived in a small town just outside of Omaha where we could have chickens. And I was in 4-H, and I decided to expand my flock and my experience in poultry, and I started dabbling in the true exhibition flock. And what I mean by that is I received birds, raised up birds, and showed them at larger shows other than the 4-H shows. So currently right now I have 4 different breeds of chickens that I show professionally, 2 breeds of ducks, and the breed of geese that I show professionally. And actually tomorrow I'm headed up to South Dakota State Fair to show my birds. So very pertinent talking about this right now. And unfortunately, this go around, we don't have as many shows this year due to COVID, but the ones that we do still have in place, I'm trying to go to as much as possible. So tomorrow I'll be headed up to South Dakota, and then hopefully in November I'll be headed to Arkansas for a show. So like Jackie said, at any point, if you have questions, go ahead and type it in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer that for you. And hopefully this works for me. There it goes. And my experience usually is delayed a little bit. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about sourcing the birds. We'll talk about housing and the great thing about the housing of exhibition chickens as opposed to just a regular old backyard flock, not much different. Feeding, conditioning and grooming, and showroom etiquette and management. That's kind of important when you go to some of these shows. So this is what we're going to kind of talk about today. So why exhibition chickens? For me, it's a very rewarding hobby. I mean, I can find things that I could spend all my money on, but spending money on chickens and going to shows and doing something that I love is very rewarding to me. And hopefully, I've got 2 kids right now. Hopefully they'll be just as interested in this project as I am. I know my wife is not. She's not a chicken person. She's a horse person. And I'm not a horse person. That's how we work out. So one misconception is you need a lot of money, a lot of capital to get started in this project. And I can tell you from personal experience that you do not. I think maybe my first set of exhibition birds that I bought from a show was maybe a total of, $20 a piece for a pair, right? Not a lot. But with these chickens, you still get eggs, right? We still have hens, even though they're exhibition or not, they still lay eggs. So if your main focus is to get eggs from your backyard flock, still a viable option. Here's another great thing that I love to do, and this is probably one of the reasons why I like to go to shows the most. It's not necessarily to win, but it's to interact with breeders throughout your region or your country. Even though some shows are 4, 6, 7 hours away, it's all worth it, even if you don't win, to talk to breeders that you haven't talked to all year or get to know new ones and just talk chickens. You get exposed to 150 plus breeds of purebred poultry in the United States. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And like I said earlier, it's a great way to get the family involved, either as a 4-H project or an FFA poultry project. Great way to get them involved. So when we show chickens, we're actually governed by 2 different bodies. Just like other animal breed organizations, the one that governs poultry is the American Poultry Association and the American Bantam Association. The APA is the oldest livestock organization in the United States, dating back to the mid-1800s. And we can attest a lot of our production birds we use today goes back to the purebred birds back then. So thank these breed organizations for helping us develop some of our commercial birds. But both of these bodies are sanctioned shows and are governed by the rules and regulations of both of these organizations. Normally when you go to a poultry show, you'll have both organizations represented. Sometimes on rare occasions only one or the other, but most of the time both. All the judges are licensed. Some may be just licensed through the APA. Some may be licensed through the ABA, or the American Bantam Association. But most judges are licensed in both organizations. When you go to a big show that's APA sanctioned, that governs all chickens. We call those large fowl and bantams, ducks, geese, turkeys, and guineas. If it's an ABA only show, it just governs the bantam chickens and the bantam ducks. So when you go to a show, 9.5 times out of 10, they're sanctioned by one or both of these organizations. 4-H shows generally are not sanctioned by these organizations. There it goes.
Brett, you want to tell them what it means by sanctioned?
Yeah, so part of it is the rules governed or set forth by these organizations. So another reason too is some of us breeders, especially myself, like to go after points. We're point chasers, right? So those points go towards master breeder and master exhibitor. So if a show is sanctioned by either of those organizations, we get points for our wins. If it's not sanctioned, then we don't get points for those wins. And then if it's not sanctioned, rules and regulations could be whatever you want, right? But it's nice to have set rules in place for exhibitors and show personnel to follow. Good question, Jackie. This is the standard of perfection. This is affectionately referred to as the chicken Bible. So if you have any inclination about getting into exhibition poultry and breeding exhibition poultry, this is the book you must have. And I will fully admit, I look at this book probably more than I actually do the actual Bible. Right? This has all the standards for each breed and each color or variety within those breeds. So me as a breeder and me as an exhibitor, I use this book to help me develop a breed to meet this standard. So for instance, if the standard for, and I raise Langshan Bantams, if the Langshan Bantam requires a 70-degree angle tail, this book will tell you that, right? And anything that deviates from that 70-degree angle is a fault, or in some cases, disqualification. So this book has all of this. It doesn't matter what species of livestock you have, like even dog, cat, rabbit, and sometimes even other livestock, they all have a standard, and this is the standard for poultry. Bantams also have their own standard, which is slightly different than this. There are some breeds that are recognized by the American Bantam Association that are not recognized by the American Poultry Association. So a few discrepancies there, but by and large, if you want to get an exhibition poultry, this is the book you have to have. A little expensive. I think last time I checked, this book was maybe about 60 bucks, 70 bucks. And it comes out about every 4, 5, 6 years. But great one to have in your bookcase. I actually have 2 copies. I have one that I take to a show, and I have one that I actually have in my barn where I can reference certain standards for when I'm looking at birds to take to show or breeding. So sourcing birds. So I mentioned earlier, there's a misconception that you have to pay a lot of money for an exhibition bird. This is absolutely not true. Now, if you want, on the very last bullet here, it says you want to purchase show-ready birds, then you might have to shell out some cash. All right, those are the birds that can be taken right from the breeder's flock and put right into a show and do really well. But by and large, if you just want to get into it, get started, have some exhibition hens in your flock, breeder hens, 15 to 75 bucks a piece is not uncommon. The pricing depends largely on the number of birds available by that breeder at the time, the reputation of the breeder. And what I mean by that is breeders that consistently do really well and have good birds and they win a lot. So they'll upcharge a little bit on some of their stock. Hopefully I can get to that point where I can charge a little bit more for my stuff, right? When you are purchasing birds, and especially if you're gonna intend to breed them and try to improve the birds, look at buying at least a trio, which is a male and 2 females, or possibly an extra male. I am horrible about this. I always keep back extra males over the wintertime because you never know who's gonna pull their weight and who's not. So I'm always stuck with extra males that come spring, but it's always good to have maybe 1 or 2 extra. Now double check, since this is a backyard flock, double check the ordinances with your county government to make sure that roosters are not, cannot be in the mix. And I can tell you from my experience living in a small town and having roosters, I would always bring my roosters in the garage at night, so at least it would muffle the sound. Didn't help my mom and dad sleep at all, but roosters still woke them up, but at least it helped with neighbor relations. So double check that first. But there are opportunities sometimes to purchase hatching eggs or even chicks from breeders. And sometimes reputable breeders like myself will hatch or sell some hatching eggs and chicks. So those are a viable option as well. That way you can raise them up, you can get rid of the roosters if you want, keep the hens, and still have something that's really good to show. All right. Come on, PowerPoint. There it goes. But the best way to source birds is actually to attend a show in your area. Right now, obviously, I mentioned a little bit earlier, shows are kind of few and far between with COVID, but within every state, there usually is 1, 2, 3, many shows, especially in those states like Ohio. Indiana, Illinois, it seems like they have tons of shows going on. I will say this, hatcheries are not a good source for exhibition poultry. Their whole mantra is quantity over quality. Every once in a while, you'll get one of those outliers that has some really good stuff, but by and large, stay away from hatcheries. And I just give you an example here of an exhibition bird, a black leghorn on top there, and a hatchery bird, a white leghorn down the bottom. So you can really see the difference in overall body and type on these two birds. So the one up above is a little more refined. The one on bottom is kind of your ordinary, highly productive white leghorn, but not really show quality. When you go to these shows, have an idea of what breeds you have in mind. And I always like to, if I go to a show and I want something, I'll actually do a little research to find out who's going to be going to that show, which breeders are there, so I can talk to them and say, hey, bring me a trio. So plan ahead a little bit. But when you're at the shows, just have a casual conversation with those breeders and gain better insight into their birds, their lines. And I'll tell you, being in the poultry world and going to poultry shows, most breeders are more than happy to talk about chickens. They'll give you any advice, they'll give you tips. I know some livestock breeders are kind of hush-hush about a few tips and tricks, but by and large, poultry breeders and exhibitors will freely give out any advice. So I'd highly recommend going to a show and talking to judges, or talking, well, judges and breeders. So here's the good thing. We're moving to housing here. So the housing for your regular backyard flock doesn't really need to be much different than your housing for your exhibition flock. A lot of space requirements might be a little bit different. Obviously, you need more space for large fowl or big chickens over the bantams. So I usually recommend about 2 to 4 square feet per bird. Generally, you want about 1 to 2 square feet, but more is better when you're talking about exhibition. So this allows for them to have a little bit easier movement, gives them plenty of perch space, and limits overcrowding, fighting, and big thing is breaking of the feathers. And we'll talk a little bit about what we do with that before show here in a little bit. Bantams, while smaller, still require ample space, but although you can raise a lot more bantams in a tighter space than you can large fowl. And consequently, even though the eggs will be smaller, you'll still get a fair, decent amount of eggs from these bantam chickens. All right. But basically, the essentials for housing aren't different. Still require a decent amount of space. Ventilation. Ventilation is key to keep the dust down, keep the ammonia down. I know last couple weeks here in Nebraska, it's been ungodly hot and humid, so keeping that airflow is good for the chickens to keep them cool. Ample amount of light, supplemental light too in the wintertime to keep those birds laying, and then ample food and water stations. Again, kind of trying to preventing that overcrowding and have the right amount of food and water for them. Outdoor access and exposure to sunlight is absolutely good for these exhibition birds as well as your backyard flock or regular backyard chickens. Promotes thriftiness and brightens up the face and comb and wattles. I'll just tell you, I'm doing this right now. I've got birds that have been in the barn a little bit too long. So I'm putting them outside to kind of brighten those face and comb and wattles up for exhibition. So having outdoor access is really good for these guys. Now, when you get to the point where you want to start showing, you will need to think about putting the roosters and hens in separate housing. The roosters' breeding habits easily break feathers, makes the hens look kind of dirty and unconditioned. Pullets typically should be raised separately from hens if possible. Usually hens and pullets can get along pretty well, but pullets by and large do better at shows than older birds just because of the youthfulness. So I'd always recommend kind of housing them away from the older birds. And roosting areas are beneficial to prevent the birds from sleeping on the floor. When they sleep on the floor, they get dirty and they're more prone to attacks by mice, which like to chew little holes in their feathers. And I can tell you from personal experience, when you get to show and you're thinking, oh man, this bird's the greatest. You open up the wing and there's mouse chew marks all over the place. So no way you're going to do well if you have that. So roosts are really good for exhibition birds as well as regular backyard flock. Oh, come on. Okay. But feeding is one of the most important things you can do. From a regular flock to an exhibition flock, there really is no requirement, a different requirement for feeds. Always recommend, if you have chicks, to start them out with a 20 to 24% protein starter with amprolium, so with the medication in it to prevent coccidiosis. Then eventually, when they start to lay, and even a little bit before that possibly, you can switch them over to a layer feed, so between a 16 and 20% protein. Totally fine to feed to roosters too. We want to watch corn in the diet though, for exhibition chickens especially. The reason is we don't want that corn, the yellowness of the corn, the xanthophylls in the corn, to come through the feathers and make them yellow, especially in the white birds. We also don't want that extra fat. We want those birds to be nice and plump, got a lot of muscle to them, feel really hard when you put them in the hand. You don't want them kind of wasty. So if you feed corn, watch out you're not feeding too much. But this one kind of goes without saying. Make sure there's plenty of fresh food and water available at all times. And then, like I said in the last slide, having outdoor access is great. Getting access to grass and grasshoppers are always a good treat. It really promotes the health and growth of these exhibition birds. Okay, and these, I just put this slide up here. Here's just some examples of 3 different types of feeds that you can feed your birds, regardless if they're just a regular backyard flock or exhibition flock. The most nutritious is the pellet because all those ingredients and vitamins and minerals are all nice and neat in a cool little pellet. But I can tell you my birds don't like pellets. They tend to sift them out. They don't really like to eat them, especially the bantams. So mine do a little bit better on crumbles and mash. It kind of whatever your preference is for your birds and what they like. All are great types of feed. Mash is a little bit less nutritious just because the birds can kind of pick and choose ingredients out of there. So yeah, there are different types of feed there. All can be found at your either co-op or your regular feed store. Let's delay here. There it goes. Extras. I would feed extras in moderation, but these are meant to supplement the feed. And a lot of these things help with shine in the feathers, make them nice and glossy, especially in black chickens, have that nice green sheen to them. Help increase body mass a little bit. And actually we use them as trainers or to entice the birds to pose for us. For instance, there's a breed called the modern game bantam or even modern game large fowl. We want those birds to stand up really tall. So we'll use a piece of cat food or a black oil sunflower seed or something to get them to stand up. So that way when the judge walks by, they think, oh, I'm getting a treat. And stand nice and pose right? So we use these as enticement tools. But the ones I like to feed a lot, black oil sunflower seeds, great for increased feather gloss, having good proteins and oils to them. I do put cat food in there every once in a while, just that extra protein and that fat. I like cat food too because it has animal proteins in it. And chickens are actually omnivores. They need meat and plants. And a lot of our feeds that we feed today are plant-based only, so that extra protein from the animal source helps out really well. Dog food, this is one of those enticement pieces, right? So I'll use moist kibble, throw in the pen and get them to pose right. Also has extra fat flavor. Oh, extra fat, I put fat in there twice. Just gives them a little bit of incentive. And then I know some guys have fed their birds ryegrass and corn, and this is to help increase the leg color and face color of the birds. Again, this one in moderation, just because of the increased xanthophyll level. Let's move over to conditioning. So your backyard flock, your exhibition flock, when you're getting ready to think about going to a show should be conditioned. And this is kind of an art, actually. And really all it is to get those birds looking prim and proper and in full feather and really good feather quality before they go to the show. This is usually done weeks or months ahead of time. And I can tell you, like I said, tomorrow I'm going up to South Dakota. I started conditioning mine probably back in the first part of June, maybe, looking at feathers and getting them conditioned that way. House your birds in small groups when you're conditioning. Right? We never want to overcrowd them at this point. And if you can, if you have the space, I would always put them in a cage individually. Excuse me. That way they don't have any pen mates that are going to break feathers and fight with them. So if you can individually house them, that'd be great. Check the wing and tail feathers for any broken wing or tail feathers, stained, or mouse chewed feathers. If you do see some, just pull them out. And this should be done at least 6 weeks ahead of the show or longer, especially on tail feathers that take forever in the males if you have the roosters. Yeah, just go ahead and pull those out. Hopefully they'll come in nice and neat and clean again. And always remember to have a clean, thick layer of bedding. And this kind of allows that manure to kind of fall through and get away from the birds. And you want to clean this frequently. I know some guys that have white chickens, and I wish I had time to do this, but I'm not retired. They, with their white birds, they'll actually clean their pens every single day. And if any of their birds has manure on them or dirt, they'll actually wash them that minute. Those are the hardcore guys that, like I said, are retired and have a lot of time on their hands. Just want to get those feathers clean before that stain kind of sets in. But if you have a clean, thick layer of bedding, usually not a problem. Allow your birds to sleep on perches. This gets them off the ground and keeps them away from those mice. But as you can see in this pen here, I have mine a little bit lower just to kind of keep those tails from hitting the top of the pen. And this is actually a bird that is heading up to South Dakota tomorrow. She got a good bath yesterday and she's looking pretty good. So hopefully that chicken above her doesn't poop on her. I sure hope not. That'll make me pretty angry, but keep those birds always in nice, clean cages. Always have fresh food and water in there at all times. And then make sure to treat the birds for lice, mites, and worms. Get them in great condition. Usually you do this, especially with lights or mites, probably about a couple weeks before. And worms you should do about 30 days before. Cage training. This is the one thing that a lot of people kind of miss, especially if you have your birds in a larger, bigger area, bigger situation. Your birds aren't used to being in a small little pen. So when you go to a show, especially in the Bantams, you're going to be in about a foot-by-foot pen. Those birds are. So cage training is a must before they go. And I like to do this a couple weeks before just to kind of get used to it. And also those incentives, those treats help a little bit too. Some birds will take it well. Some birds will acclimate to the pen really well, no problem. Others don't. It's just kind of the personality of the bird. And I would start cage training as soon as you start conditioning. Kind of an easy way to kind of do both at the same time. At least 3 days before the show, you should wash your chickens. So yesterday I washed, how many did I wash? Not many, probably about 10 or 15 chickens, I think. Doesn't matter if they're white, if they're black, if they're blue, green, you should probably wash them. Just gets kind of the dirt off of them, gets kind of the old oil on there. But the reason why we do it at least 3 days before is so we have time for that bird to kind of put those feathers back in position, kind of zip those feathers back up, and to get the natural oils put back in. This is really easy, and I'll tell you, you will get wet. That's just the nature of the beast here. You'll need mild soap, and I personally like to use baby shampoo. 2 or 3 buckets. If you have like a utility sink, even better. You just need 1 bucket, especially for white birds. Towels. I use an old toothbrush to get kind of in the toenails, get the legs all cleaned up. A hair dryer is optional. Like yesterday, it was pretty warm here in Nebraska. Put the cages out in the sun, washed them, put them out there, and let the sun do the work. If you use a hair dryer, just make sure to not go too close to the skin. We don't want to burn the skin. And laundry bluing. So what's the brand called? I can barely find it. I have to go get it at a certain store here in Omaha. But laundry bluing, Mrs. Stewart's, that's what it is. Mrs. Stewart's laundry bluing is really great for white birds. Makes them really white, just like it does for white clothes. But like white clothes, if you use too much, you're going to turn your clothes blue. So less is more when you're talking about bluing. And I usually do, probably no more than about 5 or 6 drops of it in a 5-gallon bucket. That's all you really need. So just the process of washing, get the bird wet, put some baby shampoo on there, use a soft brush to wipe down the feathers, get the dirt off, and then your manure. If you have a sink, great, you can rinse them off in the sink. If you don't, that third bucket is for rinsing. I like to dunk the birds in there, and you actually put a little bit of vinegar in there to help get the soap out. And then that third bucket is for the bluing. And then you only need this for the white chickens. I like to dunk them in there about, 10 times or so. I'll just count to 10, leave them in there, pull them out, dry them off. And as you saw with the last slide there, that bird was washed with soap and water and bluing yesterday, and she looks really good. So nothing much to it, but like I said, you will get wet in the process. They do not like to get their bath. Once you do all this, you've got your flock ready to go, it's time to show. So check your local poultry shows in your state or surrounding states. And typically shows are done in the fall and the spring, more fall than spring. And birds tend to do well with fall shows a little bit better. Coming out of the winter time, older birds just don't have a good go at it for spring shows. So fall will probably be the way to go. Contact the show secretary for a show catalog. So they will send you a show catalog with all the rules and regulations. A lot of it is how to enter, health regulations. So every state has different health regulations. And just for instance, tomorrow I'm heading up to South Dakota, like I said. I'd have a health paper to go across the border. I had to be pylori typhoid tested, so that can be done from your state. They'll come out and test for the bacteria Salmonella pylori or pylori typhoid. You'll need a certification for that and any other certifications that each state needs. So double check with that ahead of time. That health paper is usually a 30-day health paper. So, but contact that show secretary. All of that will be in that show catalog. Often the deadline for entry is between 2 and 3 weeks before the show, and that just gives the secretary enough time to get entries in, get coop tags written, and any last minute things. How do I find out about these shows? Check the American Poultry Association website, or there's a Show Poultry Central website that lists all the shows for each state. Like I said earlier, there should be, for the most part, one show at least for each state, if not more. So tons of opportunities to go to check some out. I know here in Nebraska, we've got 2. Like I said, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. I know even Kentucky and Tennessee have quite a few. So how do you get to the show? You load your chickens in your car and you drive off. Well, again, make sure you pick a carrier that's going to keep your birds clean. You're not going to get any of the feathers destroyed, and they arrive in tip-top shape. So a couple things that I recommend. You might already have these at your house, but dog and cat kennels work really well. Make sure there's plenty of litter at the bottom, pine shavings, cedar shavings, something absorbent, and you can get that manure away from the birds. I know a lot of guys in my part of the country use cardboard fruit boxes. Allows for great ventilation. They're light, they're disposable, they work really well. You can see here are 3 of my transport coops. So I have special wooden ones that if ever I'm at a show and someone's selling them, I usually grab a couple. Fairly light, easy to clean, and you can see they're solid sides. There's no wire except for the one in the middle that's going to break any feathers. but kind of make sure that we have adequate airflow though. Like tomorrow it's going to be 90 degrees here in Nebraska, and I'm assuming it's going to be fairly warm going up to South Dakota. So I want that show or that transport box to have adequate airflow so we don't get overheated. So when you're in the show, at the show ring, finding your cages can be fairly easy or it can be hard. And I should have put a picture in here of all the birds, 1,000+ birds in the show. So it'd be kind of daunting when you walk in. But the first thing you should do when you go to a show is walk over to the secretary's table and get your exhibitors list. So that exhibitors list will have your name, usually your address, phone number, whole 9 yards, as well as an individual exhibitor number. And that exhibitor number is going to be on your coop tag. When we judge poultry, normally the coop tag has that number, so it doesn't denote someone's specific bird, right? We don't want any bias among these judges. So that's why we have the exhibitor number. And when you go to a show, all these breeds are going to be caged according to a few criteria, so it makes things a little bit easier to find. They're all going to be grouped by class, and you can see here in this picture, class is English class. Then they'll be classified and put together by breed. So here's Orpington. Next would be variety, which is buff in this case, and then sex would be cockerels. Right? So in every breed of chicken, in every color, they're all categorized in the same format. So it makes things a little bit easier to find. Normally, if you can find your class, you can find where your birds go. Pretty easy. When you get there, and you can see my friends here, Roger Meyer and Aaron Stalder, they're grooming their birds. This should be done, it could be done an hour before the show, it can be done the night before. But basically what you're trying to do is the last minute prep to get your bird ready to go, so it can be really good looking for the judge. Personally, all I use when I go to a show and groom my birds, I use baby oil, and I rub that on the comb and the wattles and earlobes, face, and even the feet, kind of brighten them up, give them a nice appearance. A small brush or Q-tips to kind of apply it, or I know some guys will just use your fingers to apply that, and then a small towel. And I usually get it a little bit wet so I can wipe any manure that might be on there, just give them that nice overall gloss to them. So that's about it for grooming. It's really easy. You can see Roger there has a spray, machine spray he'll put on his birds. Some judges like that, some don't, because of the greasiness. They can kind of sometimes get on their hands, but for the most part, 3 or 4 different things, that's all you need for grooming. Reading a coop tag. I get this question all the time with newbies at shows. Like, what do these letters mean? All right. So if you go to a show and you see a BB that the judge has written on a coop tag, that means best of breed. BV, best of variety or best of color. Reserve of breed, RB. Reserve of variety, RV. All right, so these are the 4 most common ones you'll see on coop tags. Now, again, I get this question all the time. Well, what do all these marks mean? Judges may put check marks on those coop tags. They might put check plus, check minus. That's basically just for them to keep track of the birds that they're judging. In some classes, there could be, 50 Partridge wind-up bantam pullets, right? And they all look the exact same. So it's just a judge's way to kind of keep track of what they're judging, the good birds, bad birds, and just helps them out. So other things you're going to find on a coop tag, you're going to find if you get a best in class, which is awesome, which is example would be champion American bird. Best in division, so if you get champion American, that champion American gets to compete against the champion English, the champion Mediterranean, the champion whatever, to be champion largefowl. So you'll see that. And the one that I have gotten a couple times, and it's always nice to see, is best in show. And that's between the chickens, the largefowl, the bantams, the waterfowl, ducks, geese, turkeys, guineas, the whole 9 yards. So those are the main things you're going to find in a coop tag besides all the breed information and the sorting information. So there is some etiquette when you go to a show. Just like if you go to anywhere else that's structured, there is some etiquette here, right? First and foremost, you are nice to the show secretary. I've been a show secretary before. I'm always nice to them because they have the worst job of all. They have to sort sometimes 2,000, 3,000 coop tags, all right? And they have to put them all in order. So be nice to them. Move all your carriers and put them under the cages, or better yet, in your vehicle. I know some shows are going to putting all of your carriers in your vehicle to avoid any bias from judges and exhibitors. If there's a problem with a coop tag, this is one that drove me nuts, and I know it drives our show secretary nuts at our show. If there's a problem with the tag or a bird is out of place, don't move anything. They have a system, and they know that system really well. So if you move something, then it throws everything off. So just wait, talk to them, and get it resolved. Don't go in the aisles where their birds are being judged. This just keeps the judge's mind on judging, keeps the show, the clerk, mind on clerking, and just avoids distractions. Do not talk with the judge while judging. Again, we don't want to have any biases being exhibited. And a lot of times people will get a little upset if a breeder is talking to a judge as their bird is being judged. So just to kind of avoid this. Be respectful of the judge's opinion. It is their opinion that day in that moment. Another judge may have a totally different opinion. So just be respectful of the judge and volunteer to help set up and tear down cages. When I set up cages for shows, it usually takes 2 to 3 times longer to set up than it does take down, because we have so many people who are gracious and stick around at the end, but we need those volunteers to help set up as well. So those are just a few things for showroom etiquette. And finally, I'll end with support your local and state poultry clubs. Every state should have one. Some have multiple. Support them, because without your clubs, you won't have any shows. And just great to get out and meet new people and learn more about poultry. So, so I would encourage you to, if you're ever interested in exhibiting your backyard flock, again, use those same birds for your exhibition as well as for egg or meat production. We have those dual purpose breeds, like the Jersey Giants and the Plymouth Rocks and the Rhode Island Reds, that could give you meat, they can give you eggs, and great exhibition birds. So the triple threat there. So I would encourage you, if you have any inclination of trying this out, great thing to get involved with, great people to deal with in the poultry exhibition world. And if I can be of any help to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. So with that, Jackie,
Great
are there
job.
any questions?
Great job. We have a question. Can you put something between cage layers to keep poop and pee from going down into the ones below, onto the ones below?
Sure. So you can put, like for me, for instance, I use plywood, just regular old plywood. Put the cages on top of that, and just you can clean it a little bit easier that way. And that helps keep them clean. Another thing that I do too, and I'm gonna, let's see if I took a picture of it. I think I did. Oh, I put boards on the front of my cages to keep the wood shavings in. So that kind of keeps that poop from staying in too. Good question.
I remember my dad used to have individual pens stacked up, and you had to watch out for the shavings going down the back and attracting mice.
Yep.
Or in our case, it was rats. But
oh, rats are the worst. Rats are the worst. Because besides eating the feathers, they'll eat the chicken. So.
Yeah, can be a big pain. Any more questions? Type it in the chat box or in the Q&A. It was a very good presentation. I never raised them myself, but my dad loved to do it. We had Polish. He loved the Polish.
Oh, those Polish, yeah.
If you are purchasing hatching eggs and they are being shipped, what do you feel is an appropriate hatch rate?
Hatching eggs are always a gamble when they're shipping to you. I can tell you from personal experience, I've had great success with shipped eggs in, and I've had horrible success. It just kind of depends on time of the year. It depends on how the person who shipped them packed them, and quite frankly, it depends on the post office. I've had eggs come just all broken, right, and a package all broke. So I would say if you get a 30, 40, 50% hatch rate, you're doing good. Between the broken yolks and the broken membranes that you could see, if you can get that hatch, you're doing good.
Yeah, shipping is always difficult.
Yep.
Do we have any more questions? We got a thank you very much. Very helpful from Brady.
Cool.
Yeah, I thought it was very good.
Well, I know, like I said earlier, poultry shows are kind of starting to drop out right now. There are a few still going on. So I would encourage you guys, I don't know, I think one was from Oklahoma, and there's actually a really big show in Oklahoma in November. Actually, there's two of them, one in November and December. The one in Oklahoma is in, oh man, I just had it in the back. I've been there before. It is east of Oklahoma City. Shawnee, Oklahoma is a big one. So I know there's a couple in Florida too. So get out and get to those shows, check out the birds, talk to breeders, and you'll have fun. I always do. All the shows.
Is the local county 4-H division fair considered an exhibition?
It can be, yeah.
Depends on
So
whether or not it's sanctioned.
yes, so I do know some shows, not in Nebraska, but in other states, where they will sanction the 4-H show. Yep. So those kids who are competing.
Judges too.
Yep. It also depends. Yeah. So that judge has to be certified. Has to be licensed. But yeah, you can sanction a 4-H show.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you got enough good contestants, and
yep.
Joe said there are some in Florida.
Yep.
Yeah. Any more questions before we let Brett go? Did a great presentation. As I said, this is is being recorded, and I will post it later today. And some links that I put in the chat box for those that came in late, they won't have seen them, so I just add them again. We do have a website for the extension. We have a Facebook page, and I put in the American Poultry Association thing. I think they have a more recent standard of perfection than the one that you shot, but if you can't buy them every time, but
yeah.
Unless you've got that particular breed.
And the good thing is they don't change very often. There might be a few varieties that get added. Very rarely do new breeds get added. So
no, it's usually a variety.
It'll last you a while. Yep.
Yeah, usually does. So, but you want the one with the color photographs? I know they do.
Yes.
Do some black and whites to make it cheaper for people, but they don't have the pictures in it. That always makes it easier. So
exactly.
So thank you very much. I don't remember what next month's is. Do I have it in here?
Was it Raising Meat Birds, if I remember right?
Oh, right. Oh, it's me. I got to get that ready. Raising Meat Birds on the October 6th. So if you want to get rid of some roosters, or if
there you go.
raising meat birds, we'll be talking about that. So thank you very much, and everybody have a good day. Stay safe.
Thank you.